Okay, hello everybody. How are you doing today? Thank you for being here. We're going to talk about stuff that's going to appear to be legal. I am not a practicing attorney, have no interest in it whatsoever. We are discussing the California Residential Purchase Agreement. And yes, it is still joint escrow instructions. And yes, note the date up here, 12/21. Okay, so today being 3/21, it would be inappropriate to use this form on transactions prior to our release of the final version in December. Okay, and again, as Vice Chair of Risk Management at the state level here, I'm going to tell you that the words in the middle that say draft mean it's not chilly outside. It means please do not use that version. Okay, this is really intended just to give you an idea of what is coming. Okay, so it might be chilly outside. I don't know, but at the end of the day, please don't use this form just yet. For those of you that have followed along in my RPA classes, and I know that SDAR has put them up on YouTube, and it's essentially paragraph by paragraph. Those paragraphs still apply because a lot of these paragraphs are going to be the same, but I want to show you what we've done here anyway. So some of the stuff, date prepared, offer from, we have here now, we have our offer from, we have the property located. We call these the recitals. You will notice in here that there is no close of escrow date. Okay, we took that out of this part of it, but we are going to pick that up a little bit later on. So when I said that some of the things have just moved around, this is a good example of things that have moved around. Angela, can we access this video later? Good question, Angela. Send an email, if you would, everybody, to education@sdar.com. Again, education@sdar.com, and you can ask them that question. I don't have the authority to be able to do that. Barbara, when will it be mandatory for brokers to list their license number in broker information as agents must do? And so that is, I think your question is directed to the importability of the MLS Connect information. We are in that position now. You must have your DRE number for yourself and for your brokerage. Remember, the original intention was to make it readily easy for the public to find you. And Barbara, question is a really good one. We have addressed that. I know that we had a meeting with the president of our SD MLS not that long ago. And they have actually taken it forward. Some of our board members, rightly so, have brought the fact up that it is not automatically populating, and they are working on that software right now. And I think what you're referring to is right now it pulls up the broker's ID number for purposes of what it is in the MLS, which doesn't do us any good at all. And what Barbara's referring to is down here where it says the firm's license number versus the agent's license number. And y'all are really good. Yeah, good. Yes, Barbara, you did. I know. I remember. That was very, very sweet of you. And thank you for doing that. A lot of times we see things that aren't working and then we forget to bring them up. Folks, it's not a complaint. Just let us know. You have to let us know when you see something. And that's why I said a minute ago that, yes, I do have a notepad next to me. So I am going to be taking notes in case you see anything that we need to be addressing for purposes of the contract. Okay. And so for some reason, CAR listens to me on some things. And you know what? This was a lot of work. This was years in the making before they got to this point. Okay. So let's talk about the second paragraph really quick. My agency, this is essentially stayed the same, but what we have added is language, and I'm not going to go through every single point, but you will see some stuff in here. Buyer's agent is not legally required to give seller's agent the AD form signed by the buyer. It used to be that we had to exchange our forms, and then at one point we were also, for decades, we were also having to provide that third agency, which was the selling firm to the seller. And then we not only have we changed our words around, instead of calling it the selling firm, we call it the buyer's broker. And then the listing firm is now called the seller's broker. And so we've changed the names around. We do not have to exchange those forms. This is kind of a surprise to everybody, but remember, there was a massive change to the agency disclosure law not that long ago. Daniel, can you also cover how to email any CAR form for signatures online, not using DocuSign? Daniel, I know that you're asking a rhetorical question. So We have many programs. We have created another program out there for purposes of doing your forms, filling in your forms. And I actually, on the Glide program, I'm going to be doing a talk on the Glide program for brokerage tomorrow. So folks, you need to have that on your radar. On your SDMLS homepage, you're going to see, or SDAR's one page, you're going to see links together that are going to show not only zip forms, but also Glide. And so Glide has free email signature platform in it. It also integrates with DocuSign, but remember, folks, that Glide does not integrate with Lone Wolf. They are, I don't like to call them competing products. They are alternating products for what you would do. I'm on the Lone Wolf advisory board, so for zip forms. So I can tell you that we look at, trying to keep our program going really, really well. I personally really like Glide. It's a great program. And again, I'm teaching classes on it now, and I think you should consider that. So Daniel, thank you. Within the Glide program, we have signature platforms. Within the zip forms, we have signature platform that is currently free, and that is the what we call digital ink, which is really Authentisign. And so the day is coming pretty soon now. They've already announced that they're going to start charging you for those things. So again, that is one of the reasons why we have competing programs, not to call them, again, competing programs, but essentially programs that offer alternatives. Okay, all right. And both of those programs have access to the entire CA-R library. Okay. All right, Roselle, what time Glide webinar tomorrow? Thank you, good question. I am doing it for brokerage firms, so it is private to them. But if you want to have me speak, just please let education at SDAR know that you would like me to do a talk on the Glide program. I love Glide. I think it's an awesome program. And literally tomorrow, the one I'm doing is we're going beyond the basics and going up into the 200 level, I'm calling it. So do please reach out to education at SDAR and let them know your brokerage is interested in that program. So back to what we were talking about in here, we're not legally allowed to, or not legally required. We could give the AD forms signed by the alternating brokers. Seller's agent is not legally obligated to give the buyer's agent the AD form signed by the seller. It's just not required anymore. The assumption, and again, folks, by contract, the assumption is that everybody acknowledges a receipt of that agency disclosure form, and we only need to make the disclosure to our respective clients. Okay, all right. And I'm using the word clients. In some states where I teach, there's a huge difference, a line drawn between what is a client and what is a customer. And so you don't have a client until you have a contract with the client, between you and the client. So between the brokerage and the client. And then, so once you have that, whether it's for the buyer side with the buyer representation agreement, or the seller side where we have the listing agreement, those are the two contracts between us. Remember, up here, brokers are not parties to this agreement, but they are parties to their respective agreements between themselves and their client. Okay, everybody good? All right, let's go ahead and roll forward. Not a whole lot of changes in here. Some of you would remember that this paragraph was paragraph number, was it 16? Barbara, you've been around for a little while. Some of you have been around. Remember, this was way in the back of the contract, and this is part of why this contract today looks the way that it does. And the reason is because we were hiding things, action items, way in the back of the form. And in fact, the DRE deputy commissioner was in our meeting, the risk management meeting in San Diego, made a comment that we weren't filling it out properly. People were skipping it because it was at the back of the form. And that's, again, a lot of why the action items in this contract are going to be up towards the front. But at the same time, that's part of the complaint, is that agents are not going to read the rest of it. But you all know, we're all of you here, I'm preaching to the choir, we are big on education. We want to make sure that we are educating ourselves as to what these contracts say. And we also want to make sure that we educate ourselves and our client at the same time. Okay, so could be we also have my ABA form kind of an addition in here, more than one brokerage represents the seller and or the buyer. Okay, so that's what that's all about. Again, I'm not going to go through this line by line. Again, a lot of this is the same as what we have seen before. So here's my paragraph number 3 now, which used to be your financing paragraph. Now it's going to be your terms of purchase and your allocation of of costs. Okay, so this is where it gets really exciting. All right, so notice my headers down here. I'm going to be talking about paragraph numbers. I'm going to be talking about paragraph titles or contract terms, terms and conditions, and then finally additional terms. So if my purchase price becomes all cash, then it's going to gray out a lot of other things that are in here. Okay, are there any questions so far? I shouldn't say that. I've got a whole bunch of questions, but y'all are asking good ones right up in the beginning. I'm drinking Barry's tea today, which I think comes out of Ireland. Happy St. Patrick's Day, everybody, and thank you for spending part of it with me. I appreciate that. Okay, so pretty self-explanatory. These are when I remember my outline of the purchase agreement. I remember that certain paragraphs had their own titles. Okay, so certain paragraphs because they were important. All right. What time glide webinar again? I'm sorry, I think I already talked about that. Oh, what's the purpose? Wow, that's weird to push. Hey, Rick, I put your question up before Rozelle's question. So what's the purpose of all these changes? The purpose of all these changes was to attempt to clean up a lot of things that were no longer important, no longer relevant in our transactions in the old purchase agreement. Now, mind you, we hadn't touched the purchase agreement for 8, 9, 10 years. So it just became time for us to tune things up a little bit. Me personally, I think this was a massive overhaul. For those of you that remember, the contract that we are currently using came about in October of 2012. And when we did that, everybody went crazy, right? It was huge. It was a monstrous change. You know, we went, the previous version hadn't been touched since October of 02. So it was a big change for everybody. It was tough. And October of 02 created its own fanfare, right? We went from passive removal of contingencies to active removal of contingencies, things like that we've looked back on and thought, wow, you know what, that wasn't such a big deal after all. So again, the reason that we did this was because it was time to overhaul the contract. And then while we were doing that, we also wanted to change the structure of it. Okay, so again, not to go over every line by line. Close of escrow, same thing. We want a date certain. I think we're going to probably reverse this part here. Days after acceptance comes after a date certain. Expiration of the offer, 3 days by default. Some of the things that we had in the old contract stayed in there. Initial deposit talks about either a dollar amount or a percentage of purchase price, by the way, and that is consistent with contracts in other states that I teach in other states, and in some cases they offer you the option of either a dollar amount or a percentage. The default is 3 days, 3 business days after acceptance. Okay, and so obviously you can change that by filling in a blank. We've got rid of some of those little check boxes that we have over here because those are not necessarily, obviously, if you put a date in there, you're intending to change the 3 days. Okay, and again, mixing a little bit of contract law in here. Increased deposit, that's going to be considered the money placed into escrow after the initial deposit. I'm still at odds with them calling it the initial deposit. I think, you know, we always for many years, right, Barbara, the earnest money deposit. Ginny, oh, hi, Ginny, can we get a copy of the draft? This half screen is hard, half. Oh, I see. Jenny, thank you for bringing that up. Thank you for being here. Okay, on your screen, when you're looking at it, you can see, you know, my happiness over there on the right-hand side. There are a couple of little toggles right in the middle. You can pull that over to the right to make me smaller, or if you don't want to see me at all, you can just change the view and make it full screen. Thank you. Great question. Okay. Thank you for that. As far as can you get a copy of it? SDAR will be sending out a copy of this. I'll make this available to them. This is the most recent version. Nancy, for increased deposit, will we still? Yeah, but we're going to change the name. Nancy wants to know if we're going to still use the RID form. So increased deposit here, it's going to be, we're going to discuss that in just 1 second. We've actually changed the name of that form. Let me see here. Next, Barbara, doesn't it make it problematic for days certain when you're in multiple offers and days becomes uncertain for acceptance of your offer? I understand. The issue has always been that the law likes a date certain. We want you to look at a calendar, tell us what date you want it to close, or in California we call it close, in other states we call it settle. And so the answer is yes, that's always been an issue. But again, that's how contracts work. So if you need to make that adjustment during your offer, obviously your concern is when there is a counter offer, a lot of times the other agent will counter that offer out with a different time, different date, and they'll put in 30 days or 45 days, and then it'll fall on a Saturday, which means that, according to our contract, it will be closing on the next business day. And so that'll create, that is not intent the way it was intended, but unfortunately, that is how sometimes we used to speak. What time glide? Okay, there that is again. For some reason, Roselle, your message is staying at the bottom and everybody else is jumping up ahead of it. So I am looking for your questions here on the screen really quick. I know you all can't see them. So Barbara, thank you. We'll talk about that in a minute. Loan amount, again, once again, all of this kind of a condensed version of what we were looking at before. The assumption again is that it'll be that the offer is through conventional financing. We have gotten rid of the FVA form. So the FVA, you'll see down here, FVAC, that is the mandatory clause form that is required that you make the disclosure to the parties that in our transactions that the buyer is getting financing that is going to have a commitment that if the property does not appraise for what the buyer is agreeing to pay for it, then the buyer is not going to be obligated to move forward. Okay, all right. And so obviously they can choose to move forward, but the point is that everybody understands they do not have to move forward. We got rid of the FVA form, which was our repair form, and so we are going to deliver that list now. Our request for repairs form has been amended to account for that. Okay, good. I'm just trying to make sure I'm answering everybody's question. Okay, all right. Additional financing amount and or terms, much like your contract, your old contract, we just moved that into separate boxes so that everybody can see what the timelines are going to be. Okay. All right. Anything else in here? I think we're good. Occupancy type, we are assuming that the buyer is going to occupy the property, but if not, it could be secondary or it could be an investment property. In other words, the buyer does not intend to occupy the property. Remember that is extremely important for purposes of California Civil Code 1695, the Home Equity Sales Act. So you want to make sure that you speak with your buyer about what their actual intention is. Yes, here's the good news. It is 16 pages. I'm going to try to pull up the one-page purchase agreement, which was certainly one of my favorite things. And of course, my computer's not going to let me do it. Darn it all. Anyway, back to my screen here. Okay, all right. So I was going to pull up the one-page purchase agreement to show you what it looked like when I got started in real estate back in the late 70s. We are indeed going to be at 16 pages. I'm pretty sure it's going to stay like that. And again, note the copyright date. Note that this is please do not use this form. Okay, this is not going to be the final version. We are working on the form. Okay, all right. Okay, all right. Seller's credit, if any, and remember that we get into issues about whether or not the credit, if it's a contract credit versus a lender allowable credit, but we'll talk about that in a minute. Seller's credit to be applied to closing costs, which is, we have parentheses in the wrong place, or other. We'll fix that. And then because you all know that you can't give your credit has to be towards something along that line. For most lenders, again, we consulted with the lending industry, the escrow industry, the title industry, all that to come up with what this form is actually looking at. Verification of all cash. Again, all these are the same terms that you had before. You're just seeing them in a different place. Verification of loan application, we are assuming that you are going to attach both of these to your contract. So obviously someone has verified the source of down payment and closing costs sufficient to close the transaction. That's the language that I asked the lender to use when they write that pre-approval letter. Okay, and then verification, all of that stuff. The assumption here is that you are going to attach it. There is no not attached. It's either attach it or it'll come in sometime afterwards. And that's just because of our industry, the way that we do our business in general. Those are the ways that we have been doing that, and CAR has been responsive to that. Okay, pre-qualification versus pre-approval versus fully underwritten pre-approval. Some of you are really going to like that addition to the contract. And again, remember, folks, I want to make sure we're clear that this market that you are in today is a moment in time. It is, take a picture of it. It is a snapshot. For a lot of you, and I'm looking at the attendees who are here, you have seen other markets. You have seen the antithesis of this market. So just be aware that this contract is intended to go through all of that. Okay. So again, my final verification condition, 5 days. A lot of this stuff still the same thing. If you're going to do an assignment, you have to make that request within 17 days. We kind of buttoned that up a little bit. Remember that contracts are freely assignable by law. In the commercial industry, we do them all the time. We just really, frankly, kind of missed that in the residential agreement, and then we realized it created a problem. So in the last revision, we added that paragraph in there. Contingencies, time to remove them. Contingency removed. Here you go. Looking at check boxes. So for my loan contingency, notice we have moved that back to 17 days. The current contract has taken us to 21. We have an appraisal would have been 17. We're going to have 17 for both. Okay. All right. And then appraisal contingency based on appraised value at a minimum of the purchase price or some other figure. Again, we're seeing a lot. I had a conversation with an appraiser the other day who was just totally not understanding how he could appraise a property for 800 and the party paid 950. And so again, the appraised amount is what the lender is looking at. The buyer, if you're having your client purchase properties above asking price or above appraised value, CAR has some really good sample letters in the program, in Glide and in zip forms, some really good sample letters in the library. I recommend that you take a look at that. One of the big ones today that is sweeping the country are our contingent free offers. And so folks, very dangerous. Speak to your broker before you start writing offers for clients that don't have any contingencies associated with them. And again, I support a lot of agents that are calling me and asking me about whether or not, what to do about that, where the buyer is removing contingencies up front. They need to understand, and you need to have something acknowledged by them in writing. We have forms for that, and make sure that you're having that done. And certainly talk to your broker before you're doing it. Most of the rest of our stuff is going to stay the same. Investigation of property, 17 days. Informational access. So even if your buyer comes in without the contingency, then they may still have the right to access the property. Review of the seller's documents is now, again, for the buyer, 17 days, which it has been, or 5 days after receipt. So if they get everything on day 15, they've got until day 22. Okay, so let's make sure we get that stuff to the buyer in a timely manner. PR 17 days, or again, 5 days after receipt. So if you get it, on day number 3, and I have this conversation with transaction coordinators all the time, if you get the PR on day 3, I don't want to be waiting for the removal until day number 17. Okay, so this means 5 days after you get it. All right. Common interest disclosures, you remember that was your paragraph 7D, 3 and 5. And I know you're all wondering how I know the paragraphs. Teach these things long enough. So anyway, 4525, one of my favorite civil codes. It's so incredibly misunderstood. I'm not going to get into it here today. Okay, so review of leased or liened items. That's kind of a favorite of mine. If the old contract addressed it but wasn't very clear on it. And then finally, my sale of buyer's property. In the event that you check the box, it is included. And remember, we have changed a lot of forms based on the fact of the major change done to the sale of buyer's property. In fact, frankly, in anticipation of this contract. So again, my notice to buyer to perform has changed. My contingency removal forms have changed. My COP form has clearly changed. So make sure you're using the current forms, and those forms are current today. Okay. Possession, time for performance, additional terms. Again, you notice how we blocked everything for it, make it easier to understand. And the reason I'm spending so much time up to, and we're not even done page 2 yet, is because you're going to find as we get further along in the contract, we're going to get to where, we just moved to the explanations around. Default of loan, yes, Rick, back to 17 days. Claudia is the EMD. Thank you for calling it the EMD. We'll have the manner deposited, wire, check, etc. We're going to cover that in just a second. Thank you, Claudia. Very forward thinking. Nancy, why was the loan default moved back to 17 days? We just felt like it wasn't important for us to have a separation between the two anymore. And frankly, that goes to the fact that most of our most of us are working with buyers that have been pre-approved for loans. They didn't necessarily need the 21 days, okay? But you and all, Nancy, you and I, we've been around a while, and we have gotten those letters from the lender that says that the buyer is pre-approved subject to confirmation of credit. It's like, what is that? That's not a pre-approval. That's a pre-qualification, okay? Ginny, why does new contract 8C say buyer's investigation rights not a contingency? Sounds like a platform to provide work for lawyers. Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you, Ginny. We're going to cover that in just a second as well. Barbara, are these forms that need to be checked going to be in a drop-down format? Yes. Thank you. Good question. Good. Okay. I think I got everybody. All right. Okay. So time of possession. Thank you, thank you, thank you. We finally put it back to the language I have used since the beginning of time, upon recordation, okay? Possession occurs at recordation, and for me, as I've always said in all my contract classes, I want the movers to be asking, whose piano is this, right? Coming and going. When it records, I want the seller out, the buyer comes in, they're entitled. Remember, if you're going to change any of that, we have that TOPA form now that discusses time of possession as to if you're going to change that time. So nice little change, a little more specific, a little more clear than, and remember, we had changed it at one point to 5 p.m. because that's what everybody was saying. But today everybody's yelling about how come we don't say upon notice of recordation. Remember, when the property records, the buyer has a right to the keys. Time of possession could be different, and this is going to give you an opportunity to do that. But I'm telling you, the buyer's entitled to the keys. It's time to give them possession. Seller occupied unit. None of this is really any different. Again, I like that they've clarified 29 or fewer days on my SIP form. So if the seller's going to stay in for less than 30 days, again, remember, it's innkeeper or host liability are my concerns with a tenancy less than 30 days. If it goes beyond 30 days, they like you using the RLAS form, the residential lease after sale. I personally think if it's going to go beyond 30 days, I think you should be using the LR, which is the lease rental month-to-month agreement. And I kind of like that. I think it's a little more thorough, but it doesn't address deposits and things the way that the RLAS does. Tenant occupied units, again, here's my TOPA. Tenant occupied property addendum, down to my documents, fees, and compliance. Seller's delivery, same as it was before, 7 days by the seller to get the buyer all the disclosures, all the documentation, HOA, et cetera, et cetera. If you're waiting until you're under contract to order the HOA documents, you're probably not going to be on time for that, right? Unless you pay a rush. But we're going to anticipate the fact that our intention is here to close. Sign and return everything, 5 days. Current contract says the same thing. Time to pay fees. Now we put in a limit. Now whoever's going to be paying for the HOA documents, you got 3 days, okay? Remember, there's a difference between those documents required by Civil Code 4525 and those documents that are just kind of thrown in there by the homeowners association. Did a transaction just recently, and the fee was over $1,000. Install smoke alarms, carbon monoxide detectors, water heater bracing. That should say CO2. We should probably fix that. Let's see here, 7 days. Okay, you got to get all that done. This is new. Okay, so what else? I'm down into my items included and excluded. Some of you will be very excited. I know I am, and I know a couple of you out there are, that we have added the wine refrigerator to the items that could be included in the transaction. Currently, the current contract, I'm only saying that because I think it's funny that we added a wine refrigerator because we're starting to see more and more of those. But remember, your current contract talks about stoves, refrigerators, washer dryers, whatever. Now we've added a whole bunch of stuff in here. We've added the microwave as a separate item. Again, remember, a lot of these are on your transfer disclosure statement. Video doorbells, security camera equipment, smart home control devices. For those of you who've been to my house, you go room to room, lights come on, lights go off. I had to do that so that I didn't lose a fortune in electric because, Linda sometimes leaves the lights on. Now I have them go off automatically. She doesn't touch them. So God love her. But anyway, just had to do something about it. Those stay with the house. Wall-mounted brackets for video or audio equipment, above-ground pools, if any. We call those doughboys on the East Coast, right? And bathroom mirrors. Wow, look at that. Okay, sometimes we have some really ornate bathroom mirrors. And then again, here's my electric car charging system. So the answer, the previous question that came out a little bit earlier, some of these things had to be put in the contract rather than us just constantly creating addendums. It was just time to do this, okay? Rick, all these state dates after acceptance. Can you please define what constitutes acceptance? Great question. I'm going to show you in the definition section. Is it simple email sent to an agent, or does buyer need to sign notice of receipt? And the answer is no, but there is that concept of the mailbox rule, which of course is a popular one in law school, but the mailbox rule doesn't seem to apply anymore because it only addresses the offeree. So I'm going to tell you, you don't need to go into the weeds on that, but I'm going to show you the definitions in a second. Ginny, problem with possession being recordation, the title finds last minute stop prior to carrying docs to recorder. I agree with you, Ginny. Well, wouldn't you like to find that out, that it didn't record before you hand over the keys, right? If it doesn't record, I'm not giving them the keys. I've had some really ugly cases on that. Woohoo on the wine fridge. Hi, Victoria. Good to hypothetically see you. I know. CO is carbon monoxide, not carbon dioxide. I'm sorry. I meant to say, I did that all backwards. I was on a roll. Thank you, Zeno. Thanks for catching me on that. Monoxide and dioxide are two different things, aren't they? Right? Remember? Okay, good. Thank you for catching me. Daniel, I'm surprised the solar heating system isn't included over 1 million homes in California. We're going to get to that in a second. But good question, Daniel. I always get a kick out of people calling it solar system. And of course, unless it includes Neptune, Pluto, and Mercury, then it's not going to be a solar system. Okay, good. All right, I think I got everybody. Again, if you have Claudia, you had your hand up there a second ago. If you have a question, please put it into the 1 or 10. Oops, I got a whole bunch of hands up now. Who is it? Claudia, Jane. Can you put the question in the Q&A? I can't open it up for talk because we just have a lot of people that are here today. And if I did that, then nobody could ever hear each other. Are you all excited? At some point, we're going to get back together again. I love doing these classes in person. And I can tell you that education at SDAR is working now on how we're going to do that. I think that we're going to leap forward on a lot of issues. We're going to have our webinars live. And then we're working on getting a camera right now that'll follow, that'll track the instructor so that we can also present it online at the same time for those that can't make it. I'm so excited about education at SDAR. They're so forward thinking on things. And of course, if you know me, if you've been in any of my classes, you know that is going to have to be a pretty versatile camera. It's going to have a rubber neck, so to speak. Hi, Melody. Yeah, absolutely. Isn't that cool? I'm so excited. We got to do this, right? I just am at a point in my career where I just rather be in front of you, and it's easier for me to answer questions. So let's take a look. I'm still I'm only on page 3 right now, but we're doing okay. NHD, you're all familiar with that. Nothing really changed in there. Q2 and Q3, I've often asked them why they put that in there. This is where I see agents putting in termite report. There's really no such thing as a termite. It's a pest inspection report. I would recommend against doing that only because we've addressed it later on in the contract. And by calling it out, you might call out a clearance required by the lender, and you could end up with that bill, by the way. So some people think that's the way we always did it. So folks, if you're still doing things the way you always used to do them, I am the poster child for not doing things the way we always used to do them. 43 plus years in real estate. I think I've got another anniversary coming up in a couple of weeks, and I'm going to tell you something. I just embrace change. I really do. Right, Barbara? We just embrace change. Okay, smoke. Here we go again. Carbon monoxide. Thank you, Zeno. Okay, government required retrofit. Okay, you see all this same stuff you've seen before, right? I hate each to pay their own fees. I've asked them not to put that in there. We'll see how that goes, because that just opens itself up for somebody getting a break on fees without the other party knowing about it. Owner's title policy, buyer's lender's title policy, right? The Alta-R policy, okay? County transfer fees. These are all your boxes from the current paragraph 7D. Here again, I've got my HOA fee for preparing disclosures on the seller, my HOA cert by the buyer, and then my transfer fee. Somebody else can pay that, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I always remember what I always tell you folks, if you don't check the box, you're paying for it. Okay. So be very, very aware of that. All right. We got a little extra add-on over here. Moving along, home warranty, once again, buyer waives. Now, you know that even though that it is only a checkbox up here, we are going to break that down later, right? Because we want to make sure that everybody understands the importance of the decision to waive something up front in the contract, okay? So any additional finance terms, we're going to add them in here. I'm sorry, we're going to add them up top in 3G, seller's credits, other terms and conditions. I'm down now to page 4, and then we have our happy addenda. Now, we have removed some addenda, and then we've actually added some addenda back in again. So we've gotten rid of some of the purchase agreements, and we've made them only addendums. Tenant occupied property addendum, tenancy in common purchase addendum, stock cooperative addendum, other addenda. So we added into here, you all remember this from your current paragraph, what is it, 4 or 5A. And then we've added now as a default our BES and our SES form. We're seeing a lot of exchanges, so we are responding to that. My advisories, which would be your current paragraph 5B. We've added the wildfire. Some of you are going to be really happy to see that. That's in my addenda in the template that I have created for our agents to use on the RPA. If you want to copy that, send me a separate email to show you what that looks like. We have added the wire fraud advisory. Thank you. It was a form that was included in kind of the template we had created for you at CAR, but we didn't actually address it. Now we're addressing it. My favorite addendum, my fair housing and discrimination advisory. That was another one of those forms that I have said, what took us so long to do that. We've now put the CCPA up in here under addenda. I don't know why. Notice how those are pre-checked. You cannot uncheck them. I don't know why. We've talked about this many times about the SBSA being an automatic check, which means it will be automatically included in the template. Maybe that's why they don't want to do it. But I think that's a good form to have in your contract. And again, my trust advisory, a lot of these things, probate advisory was added as well. Okay, everybody follow that? Again, I know I'm speeding up. I'm talking fast. Nancy, government required retrofit is ambiguous, usually triggers seller questions. Absolutely. Okay. All right. Additional terms affecting purchase price. So now we're going to get into, now it's going to allow me to actually edit the form, which I don't want you to know I can do that. But anyway, deposit funds are good. We've added a couple little things. The parties agree to liquidated damages in the agreement. So Nancy, to answer your question from earlier, Nancy, I think it was you signing a new liquidated damages clause, which is now the DID form. Okay, so it's not the RID anymore. See, I told you we were going to address that. Retention of deposit. Again, specifies a remedy for buyer's default. I never tell anybody they're going to lose their deposit or they're going to get the other party's deposit. I always say your deposit could be at risk. I'm never going to, because obviously the decision of whether or not the person gets the deposit is going to be a decision for the trier of fact. When I say the trier of fact, that means you spend a lot of money to get in front of a judge for a judge to tell you some of the things that we already know. So again, releases of money or making deposits because agent did not know contract form well. See, first. me again? I apologize for that. That is so frustrating. I have Verizon. I'm paying for 5G, and I am not getting it. So hopefully y'all can see me again in here. Let me see if I lost any questions. Can we access the video later? Yes, it is being recorded. Oops, that's way up there, Angela. Scrolling down to the bottom here. Thank you, Barbara, for letting me know that I was about to lose everybody. Ginny, yes, you're right. You're gonna have plenty of time to review this contract with the final version. When the final version, by the way, comes out in April, CAR will start to do presentations on this, and so will we, because again, and in their own words, you know, they are lawyers. They are looking at black letter law. I'm a practitioner like you. I can tell you what this is going to do, what the issues are going to be, things like that. So that's why we're here today. Okay. So, but the final version, we're going to be doing these talks every month for the rest of the year. So we're going to be going through this. I'm going to be breaking them down paragraph by paragraph for you. So all cash offer, same as it was before. Under loan, this is new. I'm very excited. Now the buyer is authorizing the seller to contact the buyer's lender to determine the status of the loan. Enough of this playing around. I want to know how your loan is doing. Okay. And so that's really good information, something good for all of us to be able to have. It gives the seller permission, which obviously means the listing agent as their agent permission. Here's my FHA VA here for my repair. Buyer shall within time specified in 3E1 deliver to seller the notice the RR form or the AEA form. That's for the purposes of repairs. And as I said earlier, the lender under our government insured or government guaranteed loans are going to require that certain repairs be done. That is now included in the new RR form. Okay. Limits on credits we've talked about. Verification of loan applications. We're just assuming you've already done it. There's no check boxes in here anymore. Buyers stated financing. Buyers' inability to obtain whatever other financing that they didn't tell the seller about doesn't excuse their obligation to perform on the contract. Under occupancy, here we go. See if there's a lawsuit, we're going to give them reasonable costs. Condition of the property at closing, often a hotbed of activity. All debris and personal property not included shall be removed. We recommend, of course, I'm going to caution us not to write our own legal language, folks, but I see people, real estate agents, attempting to write this themselves. Let the attorneys do it. You are protected by the user protection agreement. You have some protections from the user protection agreement because of CAR. So I would be careful unless your broker has created. I know I've seen a lot of really good rewrites of this by attorneys, a counsel for brokerages. Seller remaining in after closing, we've talked about that. Contingencies and removal, we've done all of those. If you've removed appraisal and loan up front, then failure of you to get the loan, it doesn't matter which one, right? I see some people being clever, writing offers that they remove the appraisal contingency and then they come back and say the buyer can't get the loan. Oh, gee, because it didn't appraise. That's not going to be a winning argument. Let's say that, okay? No loan contingency. No loan contingency, by the way, please remember, is not the substitute for all cash. No loan contingency means we need a loan, but we're willing to go without the loan contingency at the time of the purchase. Appraisal, same kind of rule applies. Appraisal contingency, investigation of the property, title, most of that's still the same. Condominium, still the same. Buyer's review of the leased or liened items contingency. We've spelled this out a little bit better. I like that. Seller may cancel the buyer at least 5 days prior, refuses to enter into the necessary agreements with the solar power people, etc. I had that come up in a transaction just recently where I thought we kind of beat that one to death, but now people are still, if you see all those photovoltaic tanks on the roof of the house, and by the way, there are specific inspectors that will inspect those. I know a couple of really good ones that will inspect those for you. Remember, that is something the buyer should probably be doing. Removal of contingency or cancellation. notices to perform, again, changed a little bit, sale of buyer's property. So you see where we addressed it as a checkbox earlier in the contract. Now we're just breaking down the explanations. I'm just trying to find for you right now the important, am I freezing up again? I hope not. Okay, gosh darn. All right, so for some reason I have draw hit here and I don't want to draw. There we go, get rid of it. Okay, note to buyer and seller. This is currently paragraph 8A, by the way. This is the part where agents think they can't get sued for stuff that they put in flyers. Notice that it protects the seller from the buyer, not the agents being protected. Items included, excluded, home automation, smart home features. We needed to do this, folks. A lot of our homes are coming back with all the thermostats, kitchen appliances, stuff like that. We've already talked about that here. Non-dedicated appliances. Here's seller shall cooperate with the identification of any software or applications for some of these smart home features, not just go figure it out, right? I know mine are a little bit more sophisticated than most, so I would have to give you copies or access to all of that, okay? Inspections, certifications, a lot of this point of sale requirements, we finally wrote that out. Reinspection fees, if the seller doesn't have if the property's not ready to be inspected and the appraiser shows up or the inspector shows up, the seller could be liable for any fees the buyer incurs. Home warranty, statutory and other disclosures. We just did 2 weeks. We spent 2 weeks on statutory versus contractual disclosures. So hopefully you had a chance to look at that. Not a lot changing in there. Lead disclosures, lead is not a law necessarily. Lead is a federal regulation. It is an EPA regulation. You do not want to run foul of that. Okay, property built pre-78. You need to be listen. Well, you can make the disclosure on every property. It doesn't have to be just pre-78. You just have an obligation to disclose the possible existence of lead-based paint. That penalty, by the way, for that has been raised. Somebody told me it was raised to $41,000. It was 11. It's been raised to 41. Natural and environmental hazards, home hardening, fire hardening disclosure and advisory. We've added this in. And then we've also added some paragraphs regarding, defensible space, obviously. And then our condominium plan development and disclosures. I'm working my way towards the definitions to answer another question. Now we've spelled it out. It's got its own paragraph, known material facts. People call me all the time. What is a material fact? I don't know. It's going to fall under that reasonable man standard, which is a term of law that says that it would be reasonable it would be important to the reasonable man, so to speak. I don't know. There's Linda and I have differing views on what is reasonable, and in my home, Linda's going to win that argument. So, buyer's investigation of property, matters affecting the property. Anything else in title investing? Our GTO. This is new. Our GTO. If the buyer is a legal entity and so not a natural person, and the property purchase price is at least $300,000 or more, obviously, and it's made cash necessarily or some other kind of financing, then we're going to have this GTO, and everybody's going to agree that the buyer is going to cooperate with the title company's effort to comply. And that is just that statement of information just got really big for the buyer to fill out, telling them where the money is coming from. We're trying to track that money, obviously, because government doesn't like competition. So buyers, some of you are going to find that comment pretty funny. Removal contingencies, once again, same stuff. Buyer's review of documents, repair requests, etc. Here's my RR, my RRRR. What else? Seller's right to cancel. Delivered to. For those of you, I've had a couple people, I know it's kind of moot at this point. I've had 1 or 2 people sign off. I might have lost you on that last disconnect. If you don't get a copy of this document, let me know, but STR will be sending it out to everybody. Here's my GTO again, very important, okay? Very important if your buyer's paying cash, and we all know there is a lot of cash out there. 43 years in real estate, I have never seen this much cash. Cancellation, et cetera, et cetera. I'm not going to, like I said, I'm not going to read this, no time. I mean, this is like a 12-hour class. Effective cancellation, that's from the old contract, same kind of thing. Let me get down to my definitions in here. Multiple listing series. There's my assignment paragraph now is paragraph 23. They do a really good job of breaking that down. And then under my definitions, so when is acceptance? Acceptance means the time the offer or final counter offer is fully executed. So I often have conversations with people saying, I'm going to send you the fully executed agreement. Well, a fully executed agreement means it is closed escrow. So I always ask the question whether or not I should expect my check now. What they're intending to say is that it is an executory contract, which means all the parties have signed it. So time of final is fully executed in writing is different than fully executed agreement by the recipient party and is delivered to the offering party by whatever means that is, right? Or that party's agent. So if it is in the way that we have been communicating about things, then we're going to consider that acceptance. But remember, it doesn't have to be on this form. I want to show you really quick the change to the RCSD. Is there anything else in here I'm missing? As is counting days. God, how many times have you had this question where how many days is it? How do we count the days? And this is, and I got to give Neil Kalin credit. This guy is brilliant. I contacted him a while back and I said, why does the contract say that days shall be, calendar days unless otherwise specified, et cetera, et cetera? Why don't we just say the next business day? And there's this whole legislative intent behind how they changed the wording and all this stuff. So anyway, I'm sure I have it someplace. I hope I've saved it, but it was a brilliant conversation as to why we do what we're doing. Legally authorized signer, the person who has authority to sign on behalf of the principal. I'm going to show you that right now. Here's finally my explanation of the separate initially of liquidated damages and arbitration. We addressed it in counter offers, but we didn't really have the language in the purchase agreement as to what that means if somebody misses something. Here's my legally authorized signer. Wherever the signature or initials of the legally authorized seller or signer, identified, deemed to be in representative capacity. We're going to take a look now. Down at the bottom, here's my liquidated damages. You're all familiar with that. Mediation now has its own paragraph. We got tired of explaining that it is not the initials at the bottom of arbitration did not constitute agreement to mediation. Mediation is by default. Arbitration still looking the way that it does. Expiration of offer. Entity buyers. Here we go. So entity buyers, if the paragraph is completed or an RCSD is not required for the legally authorized signers designated below. We've done this for both the buyer and for the seller. So if this paragraph is complete, you will no longer need the RCSD. So folks, again, please use the RCSD in your transactions today until we release this form. And we're just telling you that you will not need to have that RCSD. I don't think it hurts, but I don't want you to create a conflict between what you've written in the RCSD and what the intent is over here in the contract, right? Because the RCSD is going to continue to be an addendum versus or a separate disclosure versus hopefully it's not inconsistent with what you've done in here, okay? Name of the legally authorized signer is or are, okay? So again, you would write your offer for purposes of the way that the buyer is going to be taking title to the property, how they want their name to appear on title, but the person signing on behalf of that buyer, if it is a non-natural person, we're going to need to use that RCSD form until this one comes out, okay? All right, so we just added the language in here. Same thing goes on down here. We're going to do that for the seller as well, an entity seller, so a non-natural person, okay? Offer accepted, no counters offer not accepted, no counter offers being made. The offer was not accepted by the seller. Note that the seller's initials show up in here. And notice we have also, you're not seeing it in here, but we're going to see in a second down here, we're going to see that the presentation of offer does not require the seller's initials, but it could require, we have a duty to do this. So look here, what we call the broker box, and I know I've hit my time limit. My broker box has changed some of the language, and we're seeing. By the way, we're seeing some issues with cooperating broker compensation, we're gonna disclose. Please make sure that people know how much money you're getting paid. Shall we put it that simply? Questions? Melody, thank you, Kevin. Have to jump off. I'm sorry, Melody. I know I've run over. Oh God, there is so much to tell you as always, and obviously I'm a little excited. Thank you, Melody. Libby, hi, Libby. Apologies. Mary and I have to jump on another Zoom. Thanks so much. In fact, I'm supposed to be at UCSD right now in a meeting of the instructors there. Nancy, I don't get what you're saying about the RCSD use. Please continue to use the RCSD until the new purchase agreement comes out and it is official, not the draft version. And as you saw by looking at the form, it tells you that you don't need the RCSD if you fill out the new purchase agreement. Okay. Thank you so much, Barbara. Thank you for being here. Daniel, isn't compensation spelled out in the escrow instructions? No, the escrow instructions are not necessarily your authority to be paid. Your authority to be paid is based on the listing agreement between the seller and the listing brokerage, and then your ability to receive a commission as the buyer's agent or buyer's brokerage. In some cases stems from that, but it could, in our office at least, we do buyer representation agreements, so we never really worry what the other agent says that they're going to pay us because we expect compensation that we're used to getting. Aaron, did I miss solar lease ownership is transferred? Yes, we did. We covered that back a little bit earlier. Hey, Glenn, thanks, buddy. Informative as always. Thank you so much. Thank you all for being here. Hi, Sarah. Date yet for the new RPA, December 21st. And I think that any other questions on this, because I'm going to have to let you scooch. I've got to be in another meeting. We have covered a lot of stuff. I got a couple hands up. Who's got their hands up? Let's take a look. Hey, Calvin, Alfred, questions real quick. What you got? Put them in the Q&A box. Thank you, Claudia. Jillian, hi. Thanks, Kevin. Good to see you. I'll be following this closely. Absolutely. Yeah. If you're a transaction coordinator, you need to be very aware of the new changes to the agreement. So thank you all for being here today. I'm going to go ahead and hop off. A lot of people are hopping off, have to be in other meetings. I've got to be in one myself. But I wish you all the very best. Thank you, Alfred. You're very kind. Thank you so much. And I very much appreciate your time and certainly listening on what I've got to say. Thank you, Roselle. Thank you. Thank you, Nancy. Again, we will send you the versions, okay? SDAR, I'm going to give, thank you, Sarah. I'm going to give SDAR the current draft version. This is the most current version, and they will send that all to you. If you don't get it, circle back with me. Let me pull up my email again. Here is my email address. So if there's anything I can help you with, I hope you will please let me know. I wish you all the very best. I thank you so much for being here. I'm preaching to the choir. Thank you for taking advantage of the educational opportunity offered to you by the San Diego Association of Realtors.
Need more help? Contact SDAR Member Services at 858-715-8040 or membership@sdar.com.